According to a survey of the US's most prominent CEOs, 79% plan to require employees to fully return to the office within the next 3 years, despite overwhelming evidence that remote work boosts efficiency, cuts costs, and reduces turnover. Raising the question, why are companies so desperate to force a return into the office? What began as a solution during a global crisis, working from home isn't actually a revolutionary concept. Throughout most of history, farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, bankers, and even doctors often worked where they lived, seamlessly blending personal and professional lives with a sense of individuality, ownership, and responsibility. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution, when centralized factories introduced hierarchical systems, that productivity was now tied to physical presence, creating a model built on proximity and visibility, where by the mid-20th century, corporate offices were now seen as the centerpiece of professional life. Suburban expansion, driven by the GI Bill and the interstate highway system, now tethered workers and the concept of the American dream to long commutes into the office, where being physically present was synonymous with productivity, loyalty, and ambition. However, by the 1980s, a shift in corporate priorities away from innovation and towards maximizing efficiency in the pursuit of the bottom line, where advances in technology will practically reduce the need for face-to-face interaction, creating an environment focused on metrics and oversight while still being contained in a culture that being seen at the desk reigned priority, regardless of the output. And as a result of this global shift to remote work, it has become increasingly obvious just how much the traditional office environment relies on perception rather than measured value, a dynamic particularly evident in the managerial class. Nick Bloom, a Stanford economist and leading researcher on hybrid and remote work, conducted a study involving a NASDAQ-listed company with 16,000 employees, revealing that fully remote workers were 13% more productive than their in-office counterparts. They worked more minutes, took fewer sick days, and handled more calls, all while maintaining effective quality. Yet despite these measurable gains, remote workers were promoted at significantly lower rates, underscoring the cultural out-of-sight, out-of-mind bias, as nearly 70% of supervisors admit they view remote workers as more easily replaceable than on-site workers. Bloom's second study, which analyzed the impacts of hybrid work, where employees alternated between home and office environments, also revealed similar patterns. Conducted with over 1,600 participants across 2 divisions of a company employing 35,000 people, the study revealed that hybrid workers experienced a 4.4% increase in productivity, a 33% improvement in retention, and higher levels of job satisfaction. And yet, despite the measurable gains, performance reviews and promotional rates remained unaffected, highlighting the deeply ingrained managerial bias that being present in the office provides more value, since it can be visually monitored. This perspective is further reflected in broader corporate trends, where 61% of managers perceive remote workers as less productive, and 53% believe company culture suffers when work is distributed, even though 60% of companies acknowledge that remote and hybrid employees perform just as well as their in-office peers, with 52% even citing improved productivity as a key benefit of remote work. And yet the office is still used as a tool to perpetuate this facade. Seth Beswernick, CEO of the software company Conductor, made headlines in 2021 when he decided to double his company's office space, despite the increasing prevalence of remote work. His vision for the new space included not just functional necessities, but features like a pickleball court. As for Beswernick, this move wasn't just about logistics, it was about symbolism, describing it as preserving the company's soul.
And what could be better than serving up smiles?
Being dead or anything else.
In a message alerting employees for a return to the office, addressing the importance of strengthening culture and teams, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy stated, "The biggest reason I'm still here is our culture. Being so customer-focused is an inspiring part of it, but it's also the people we work with, the way we collaborate and invent when we're at our best, our long-term perspective, the ownership I've always felt at every level I've worked, the speed with which we make decisions and move, and the lack of bureaucracy and politics. However, in this pursuit for collaboration, culture, and assigned desk placement, Amazon is facing substantial financial incentive to force a return into the office. In 2018, Amazon secured over $750 million in state and local subsidies to establish its second corporate headquarters, HQ2, in Arlington, Virginia. These incentives were contingent upon meeting specific job creation targets and contributing to local economic growth. As a result of the global crisis disrupting hiring plans, and with remote work being more prevalent, the envisioned office spaces have remained underutilized, causing Amazon to yet receive any incentive payouts. Additionally, the company was expected to benefit from a share of the growth in Arlington's tax revenues, particularly from the transient occupancy tax on hotel stays, under the assumption that Amazon's presence would boost local business and tourism. However, with many employees working remotely and business travel not rebounding as anticipated, the expected increase in TOT revenue has not materialized. Not to mention the many other tax incentives they're missing in markets outside of Virginia. And yet, at the same time, the broader commercial real estate market is teetering on the edge of a crisis. According to the 2023 Financial Stability Report from the Federal Reserve, financial institutions hold 60% of all commercial real estate loans, causing sustained losses that could shake the financial stability of major banks in an already volatile market. Regional banks, which hold approximately $2.3 trillion in commercial real estate debt, are particularly exposed. And major firms like Brookfield Asset Management and PIMCO have already defaulted on significant loans, resulting in 52% of researchers, academics, and market contacts citing commercial real estate as a significant risk to the country's financial stability, where office-centric economies are struggling to adapt. According to research from Stanford economist Nick Bloom, workers commuting into Manhattan are spending $12.4 billion less each year than before 2020, where Bloom's analysis further notes each worker spends nearly $5,000 less per year in areas surrounding their offices, reflecting that once again, corporate executives as well as government officials avoid or resolve financial crisis by leaning on the average worker, consumer, and American to squeeze what little remainder they have to keep this facade going.
And I encourage you all to go shopping more.
And if I'm being honest, I actually can understand this illusionary pursuit for collaboration. I believe that collaboration is very important, and I believe that it can be incredibly effective in certain manners and certain settings. I also am a huge proponent of face-to-face interactions, as well as culture. I think that culture is important. I think all of the things that they're creating, the facade, I can see the values in each and every one of them. The fact of the matter is, that is not what's happening in most corporate offices, and we all know that to be true. And that's the most frustrating part. The reality is you are forced to act a certain way, which makes everyone not really want to be there, not as friendly as they should be, or they would maybe want to in a natural environment. And then you are forced to sit in a certain desk arrangement to then get on Zoom to network with the people around. It makes absolutely no sense, and it feels like nothing but a time waste. I have an interesting story about the collaboration. During my last year of working at the bank, the CEO was going through each of the markets in the United States, and he came to the Austin market, and what was happening is either him or his team was going through each branch in the market and picking 1 to 2 employees to come and have a collaborative lunch. I think it was more of a networking session where you get to meet other higher up executives, kind of have the opportunity to demonstrate why it was that you got chosen to ask questions and these different things. So I ended up being the candidate that was selected out of my branch. However, I never knew I was invited because my manager already declined me going because he didn't want to be short-staffed during the lunch rush. So I just want to reiterate the fact, the bank I worked for is in the top 3 biggest banks in the nation. The CEO is literally like one of the CEOs. And I had the opportunity to at least shake his hand, look in his eyes, and get a sense of, what's going on. Imagine the value I could provide to you guys having had a conversation with him. And that got declined because, I need to be there to support the lunch rush. I don't know. I mean, what kind of collaboration culture and, all it does is it just reiterates the fact again that it's all about perception and not about actual value. Leading me to my final point, I believe the genuine incentive behind companies wanting employees back into the office is nothing more than a hidden mass layoff.
We've talked about quiet quitting. Now there's a new trend, quiet cutting. Companies are finding alternative ways to cut costs, and that means reassigning employees instead of getting rid of their jobs.
AT&T has exemplified this approach, causing 26,000 managers across the country to relocate to just 9 office locations, effectively removing those unable or unwilling to comply. Dell's tactics came from providing a 4-day notice to employees calling for an immediate return to the office, leaving those with families and other commitments completely blindsided, forced to scramble and reorganize their lives to comply with the abrupt mandate. But for companies like Amazon, this discrete style of layoffs is nothing new, as former employees from AWS have shared similar accounts where Amazon's management falsifies employees' performance ratings and places them in a productivity program called Focus. Once employees are placed in Focus, it becomes incredibly difficult for them to get out and are often encouraged to resign. The main goal is to instill fear into employees, to work fast and to keep labor costs low, with a lack of seniority alleging that rigid RTO policies were less about collaboration and more about making work so inconvenient that employees would resign. And since Amazon called a return to the office, 73% of surveyed staffers have considered quitting. And with companies that have effectively reduced remote work, 72% have already lost valuable employees as a result. And 63% say they have lost quality candidates who dropped out of the hiring process due to wanting more flexibility. Which leads me to believe that not only are they wanting to participate in a discrete form of mass layoffs, there's also a real incentive to just clean house on those that can effectively see past the corporate facade, because they don't want actual workers, they want followers. As I begin to wrap up this video, this is another script that I have thought a lot about the conclusion, and I've struggled thinking about how can I tie the knots, because this is one of the first topics that really began to form some of the glue of the concepts that I've been dancing around. For those that have consistently watched my videos, I talk about the labor market, obviously, consumerism, and American ideology. And there is a specific flavor that all of these kind of share. But I wasn't able to form it together, and that's because when you're a worker, an employee, you think of your job as, I have a task. My job is to effectively and efficiently complete the task. When the task is over, I either go to the next task or my job is done and I move on. That's the logical, common sense perception of what a job is. It's the inverse. When you look at it from the top down, what it is that you're supposed to do is do your job good enough that it doesn't necessarily draw red flags, but it's more important that you're just there, you're by the water fountain, you wave, you do whatever it is that you're supposed to do, rather than doing what you should do or what you should actually be doing or providing value. It's not about value, it's about perception. One of the biggest things that my videos discuss is that throughout American history, the societal elite always believed that the common American was not intelligent enough to participate in democracy. So what they did is they provided the illusion that you had the opportunity of choice. When you look at how consumerism was intertwined and honestly just replaced American cultural values, well, what it was taming and manipulating, engineering public consent because we are nothing more than the bewildered herd, as Walter Lippmann stated. When you begin to realize that, you see that the discussion of remote work is the first time in recent American history, within the last 50 years, that the American worker is able to see what is happening. And I think that this is globally. My channel mostly talks about Americans, but globally this is happening. You're beginning to see through the corporate facade. You're beginning to realize what it is that I am doing doesn't make sense. It's not worth my time. I am worth more than what it is that's happening. It is a real step in the right direction of realizing we are intelligent enough. We are enough. You are enough. You are not a part of the bewildered herd. And I think that that is why this divide is so complicated and also so aggressive between employers and employees, and then those that kind of want to be on the outside of the arena looking in. I think it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening from this. If I'm going to look at it in a logical sense, I am concerned that employers can't get to outsourcing jobs quick enough to then be replaced by AI. On the flip side, I'm really just intrigued to see what happens in terms of will individuals begin to foster their own collaboration outside of the workforce. What I've found within myself is as I have started working from home, the more I have personally pursued real, tangible collaboration, culture, community. I didn't do that when I worked in my corporate banking job. I couldn't get home quick enough to close and lock the doors. Since stopping that, I truly want to be an active part of the community. And that came from me being actually efficient in my job, that now I had the energy and the availability to pursue what it is that I believe provided value. There isn't enough value being provided from the institutions that are supposed to be providing it. So I think what we are seeing is a collective amount of individuals rising to the occasion to complete that. Sorry for you guys hearing me rant there at the end. I hope that maybe there was a little bit of something there that provided something, but yeah, thank you all so much for your time. This was a really interesting concept. As always, I try to hit it from all of the different directions, and the way that I pursued this one, I thought was interesting, and I learned a lot from it, and I hope that you did as well. Thank you all so much as always. Until next time, bye-bye.
There's gonna be a few changes around here. Every time I catch you two goofing off, I'm gonna charge you for it.
18, 19, and 20. Here you go, Mr. K. I think this should cover all my nonsense. Oh, and here's an extra 50 cents for when I was tying my shoe.